Good afternoon, everybody. Steve Marchand from Move the Goalpost on Wednesday afternoon, the 11th of September. I hope you all had a very good primary day, got out and voted. And if you're like me, you were very interested, not just in who won and lost, but maybe a little bit of how things went down, why they went the way they did. So I hope to save you some time of having to go through it all. And I wanted to share five takeaways that I had from primary night. And in order to allow this to happen most easily, I'm going to share my screen with you and hope that this will give us a way to, with a hat tip to New Hampshire Public Radio, to show you some of the things that happened on primary night that I thought were interesting. Let me start with number one, the governor's race on the Democratic side. As you can see, Joyce Craig ended up winning by a solid 6 point margin. By the midpoint of the evening, that lead got to the mid to high single digits, and it pretty much stuck there. About 115 to 120,000 people voted in the Democratic primary. That exceeded the Secretary of State's estimate by about 15 plus thousand. So it was a very solid turnout. But a couple of things that went into Joyce's victory over Cindy. As you can see from the map, it looks a lot like a lot of these, for lack of a better term, establishment or Manchester or Southern New Hampshire centric candidate taking on more of the outsider, often somebody with more of a CD2 profile. In this case, the backgrounds were very similar. The positions, the policies were extremely similar. And so I think there was more made of any of these differences than actually existed, and they will work together in the general. But look at this. You can see from the green, these are the communities where Cindy won, and you can see the dominance in the southern and southeastern part of the state. And a couple of points. You can see here, for example, in Manchester, Joyce's home turf, she ended up winning by a very significant margin, and it ended up providing a margin of over 3,500 votes. On the other hand, when you go to Concord, which was Cindy's home turf, it's a smaller community, and she came out about 1,300 votes ahead. So when they both got their home turfs out of the way, Joyce started with the lead, and that was something that I think was always going to be in play. But here is where the advantage really kicks in a lot of times for the Southern New Hampshire based candidate. If you look at a place like Hanover, Cindy won it, as you would expect, but only won it by about 10 points. And it ends up only being a vote margin of about 157 votes. And you might say, okay, well, that's a solid win. So that must mean that it'll be hard to make up in these really red towns, except for, look at this. Take a place like Danville, one of the reddest towns in the state. Joyce won it by a significant percentage margin, but it was about about a 90 plus vote margin for her in the town of Sandown. So you can see when you take a few of these commuter zone towns, Kingston, where Joyce won by 100 votes. Just Kingston plus Danville was exactly 157 vote margin added to Joyce, which was coincidentally exactly the same number of votes as the margin for Cindy in Hanover. So you can see in the southeastern part of the state, these margins get big, they add up, and you add that with Manchester, Joyce also with a significant advantage in Nashua that brought another 1,800 votes, and it gave her a durable lead that ended up was going to be able to survive Cindy's success. You can see in a lot of these smaller CD2 towns, Kane and Enfield, you can see she has these leads, but you only get 100 to 200 votes at a time. And then you get to a place like Keene, and that was one of Cindy's best communities. She won almost 2-1 there. But really, this is the power of southeastern New Hampshire. Even though these are very red towns, they also are they're big. And that means that even a small percentage of those populations coming out and voting was going to make a big difference in the case of Joyce as she was trying to pull out this race. A very quick look at CD2. I think by the end, the prognosticators had Maggie Goodlander likely to win the race. I'm not sure that folks saw a margin of 27 points in their future. But you can see that it was a consistent lead across the various communities in the district. Concord, 63-36. Nashua, 64-35. A place like Berlin, which is a very different kind of Democrat, Maggie Goodlander, 71-29. And we can keep going around the state. You've got places like Claremont and Claremont, 67-33. There was this margin: Littleton, 56-41, Salem, 68-32, Peterborough, 70-20. And so Colin narrowly won some of the big Upper Valley communities like Hanover and Lebanon, but obviously not nearly enough with the kind of 2-to-1 margins that Maggie was enjoying in most of the rest of the district. And the main takeaway there, whether it's Keene at 61%, Concord at 63%, Salem at 68%, it didn't really matter. It was an across-the-board dominance. I think the spending advantage allowed a broad base of name ID to get embedded across the district. There's definitely a gender advantage, and I've talked about that before in past broadcasts, for Democrats in low turnout primaries. We saw that in the Executive Council 2 primary, which we'll get to in a moment. But we certainly saw that at play here as well in a head-to-head matchup, Maggie and Colin. So this was not one where she had a unique advantage in Nashua or in certain parts of the district. This was a dominant performance that was unusually consistent across the district, with the exception of the Upper Valley, which takes us to the other congressional district. Chris Pappas was not contested in CD1. CD1 Republicans, though, had a real dogfight, with 3 candidates finishing within 2,300 votes of each other. And Russell Prescott, the longtime former state senator and executive counselor from the Seacoast area, the Kingston, Exeter area, winning this primary. So what happened here? Here's the big takeaway. I think for Joe Kelly Levasseur, this was sort of his primary to win or lose, and he lost, not by much, but largely because he did very little outside of Manchester. He didn't do very much advertising at all, spent very little money. But you can see in Manchester, complete dominance. He got 57% of the vote in a large field. He had a 3,200 vote margin coming out of Manchester versus anybody else. He had a 3,450 vote advantage over the eventual winner, Russell Prescott. So how does somebody start with that big an advantage in the biggest city and not get there? Well, you can see Joe Kelly winning in a lot of the collar communities around Manchester. You can see a more narrow victory in Bedford. You can see that in Goffstown, again, about a 10-point victory, but not coming out with huge vote advantage. In Hooksett, again, that was a more substantial victory, but a relatively small number of votes with a lot of splitting of the vote. You can see in some of the very Republican smaller towns just east of Manchester, like Candia, again, Joe Kelly Levasseur, well known in the immediate Manchester area and able to win those. The problem was that, and you can see Auburn, same thing. As he moved away from Manchester, those numbers started going down very quickly. Exeter, which is a real stronghold for Russell Prescott, you can see got 48%. Joe Kelly unable to get to second place there. And you can see that Holly Novoletsky was able to get second place in a lot of these other parts. And that got her almost to the finish line, but not quite enough. Again, Russell Prescott, 47% in Stratham. But look at Joe Kelly Levasseur, 5%. We go all the way out to the Seacoast. Portsmouth, obviously a huge Democratic town, but a lot of votes there. And you can see Levasseur under 10%. Novoletsky and Prescott both doing pretty well there. So that's an example, an unusual race where we had such a Manchester-centric candidate that was able to be uniquely dominant, but was unable to get enough name ID to be able to represent and pick off some second or even third place finishes in other parts of the district. If he had been able to do a little bit of that, he probably would have won. As it was, he came pretty close. So Russell Prescott, the general election candidate in CD1, that was an odd-shaped performance by the various candidates. The next point I want to bring up, point 4 of 5 I want to bring up, is Executive Council District 2. The most important race that wasn't getting talked about. Cindy Warmington had vacated the seat to run for governor. It is a very Democratic seat. It's gerrymandered. The other 4 districts lean Republican. This one, a Democratic leaning seat. And I put together a sheet as the night went on and ranked them by the approximate size of the community relative to the district. So you can see in 2022, the city of Concord was over 15% of the entire second executive council district. And you can see that Mike Liberty, a newcomer to politics, he was born in the Hollis area. He left for school and was very successful in the tech industry, eventually came back, used a significant amount of his own resources, taking on Karen Leod Hill, the former mayor of Lebanon, longtime city councilor, current county treasurer of Grafton County. She's run campaigns. And so it was a very interesting contrast, woman versus man, deep roots in Democratic politics versus newcomer, ability to self-fund versus somebody that did not have that ability. Liberty ended up outspending Leod Hill by more than 4-1. And so this was very interesting. And you can see what ends up happening. Leod Hill ends up winning by, I believe, low double digits when all the votes came in. How did it happen? Well, here it is. If you rank these communities by size within the district, Mike Liberty narrowly winning in Concord, that's an impressive win for a first-time candidate. But then look, the second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth biggest precincts or communities in the district, Keene, Hanover, Lebanon, Peterborough, Hopkinton, Karen Leod Hill winning all of those, including, look at that, Keene 60-40, Hanover 70-30, Lebanon almost 75-25. And those are big margins as they add up. And as we went down, as the communities get smaller, you could see that in the Concord area, Mike Liberty was able to win by between 50 and 59% in places like Bow. You see Claremont, he narrowly won that, but pretty much an even Steven race there. And then as we go down the list, you could see Mike also with a win in Plymouth. But generally speaking, in the communities in the district that were generally more progressive, generally more Democratic, and generally the biggest ones, Karen, despite the spending disadvantage, clearly had the advantages of the nature of her grassroots campaign, 20 years of relationships within a lot of these communities, as well as being a woman in a head-to-head contest in a Democratic primary, doubtless a positive factor. Look at those win margins in Hancock, 2-1, Chesterfield, 2-1, Lyme, more than 70%. And then you keep on moving down, and you can see that these get to be very small and was more competitive as we get to the smaller towns. So that was an example where dramatic contrast in the two candidates. Karen will now be a prohibitive favorite to win the general election and to be the Democrat on the executive council, kind of the autopilot Democrat. That'll be one of the highest ranking Democrats in state government. And hopefully there'll be a few other Democrats joining her at a minimum to get Democrats back in the majority over there. A couple of down ballot races I wanted to highlight before we finish up here that I was taking a look at. One of them was a state Senate primary. We had 3 excellent candidates. Tara Reardon, who a former longtime state rep, county commissioner. She has worked in state government, as well known as anybody in the Concord civic community. Not even mentioning that her husband is the recently former ex-mayor of Concord, Jim Boulay. You could see this was Concord, Bow, Hopkinton. And I think a lot of folks thought Reardon would run away with it. Rebecca McWilliams, state rep from Concord, came very close to winning. Very impressive performance, I think. And the way she did it, you could see here, Angela Brennan, also a strong candidate. Angela won her hometown of Bow. The challenge that she had was simply that it's a smaller community relative to Concord. You could see in Hopkinton, a suburb of Concord, McWilliams actually narrowly winning Hopkinton outright, and but not with enough votes to make up the margin that was Concord, where although McWilliams with a really impressive second place there, that margin of about 270 votes, 280 votes, was a little too much to overcome in the 2 suburban communities around it. So Reardon will be a prohibitive favorite in the general. That's the second most Democratic state Senate district in New Hampshire. Obviously, we had a lot of state rep races. Very few of them had primaries on the Democratic side. here is one that I spent some time in with Move the Goalpost. And this is an opportunity. It's an R+3 district. It's moving towards the Democratic Party, and it involves three communities that are three very different ones. Ringe, which is one of the reddest communities in that part of the state. Dublin, which has become kind of Peterborough West and is an extremely blue community. And then Jaffrey, which has moved from red to blue, but remains one of the more purple districts in that part of the state. Hannah Bissex, who I'm very bullish on, she ran in the very difficult Ringe district last time, comported herself well, but had no chance really in that very red district. She's now running in a flotarial, the one I'm describing, and she was a top vote getter in this primary. And Tom and Jed, also strong candidates, but you can see Hannah and Tom emerging victorious here. You can see the three towns here. In Jaffrey, Tom actually winning that. It's going to be very important for the Democrats to max out performance in Jaffrey as it's moving in a Democratic direction. Ringe, that's where Hannah lives. Here, we don't expect either Democrat to win in this two-seat district, but what we are looking for, hopefully, is to mitigate the potential losses in the district, and that will allow Dublin to kick in. Dublin is smaller, but is very Democratic. You can see Hannah and Tom doing very well there, particularly Hannah, and I would expect Hannah in particular to really crush it in the general election. I think women on the ballot, particularly in primaries, tend to drive up interest and turnout, particularly among folks that may not know much more about the candidates. And Hannah's a great candidate, as will be Tom. So I'm excited about that. A final note that I don't have a graphic for, Sullivan 7, which is a big flotarial district in R+1 that includes a number of towns, including Plainfield, Newport, and so forth. Jenny Ramsey had to be a write-in candidate for the Democrats in order to get to the general election. And so there was a little bit of holding your breath. I know they did a lot of work there, and she was successful. And so she will be the general election candidate. You can go to movethegoalpostnh.com, and you will see a full list that will soon be augmented with new candidates that I think have a chance and have done really well so far in this election season. But Jenny was one that we've targeted early. It's one of the most competitive House districts in New Hampshire. It's a single seat district that we narrowly lost in 2022. And I think Jenny, former chair of the Plainfield School Board, which is a fantastic profile to run in a purple district like this, I think she has a great chance to be successful. But she achieved job one, which was to get the write-in and to appear on the general election ballot. So that's a quick rundown, a little less than 20 minutes. Now you don't have to go back and read everything. You can go on my YouTube channel if you're not already there seeing this. That's at Steve Marchand NH. We've got a number of videos like this. We have some from last night's live stream of the primary results. And we'll have a lot more as we go in the days and weeks to come. And of course, go to movethegoalpostnh.com. You can get a lot more content there. And shame on me if I don't mention that you also can donate. We raise money to help the candidates. We're very excited, been able to get some pretty good checks out to candidates already, and that will just continue in the next couple of weeks as they try to finish up their fundraising goals and just focus on knocking on doors now that we're in general election season. Thanks very much, guys. Look forward to seeing you all soon on the road. Bye-bye.